I wanted to do a quick review on energy pyramids. So again, remember, energy pyramids show how much energy is at each feeding or each trophic level. So for instance, right here, you can see at the very bottom we have the producers, plants. There's 100% energy stored in their chemical bonds through photosynthesis. They've stored it in the molecule of glucose. And as these primary consumers feed on these plants, they only get 10% of that stored energy. Now this secondary consumer, right here, this horned lizard, would only receive 1% of that energy, right? And then right here, I think that looks like a road runner. This would be our tertiary consumer, or third level consumer. Only 0.1% of this original energy down here from the producers is available for it to create more of its tissue, its muscle mass, to incorporate into its body. And then last, right up here at the very top of the food pyramid, it looks like a gray fox would be a quaternary level consumer. Only a mere 0.01% of that original energy starting with the producers here. So as you go up the food pyramid, energy decreases drastically. And also as you go up the food pyramid, you can see very fewer organisms are supported at the top than down at the bottom. So let's take a look. All food pyramids are based on a food chain. So we start with a producer, a grass, here in this case. And then we know that the energy is going to flow into grasshoppers as they feed on the grass. And then we have frogs feeding on the grasshoppers, so the flow of energy is going to the frogs. Then the flow of energy is going into the trout are feeding on the frogs. And then the last, at the very top, we have humans feeding on the trout, and that energy is flowing into the humans. So I've taken that food chain and put it into this food pyramid. Grass here, grasshopper, frog, trout, and man. So again, all the food pyramids are going to be starting with the solar energy of the sun. Only about 1 or 2% of the solar energy that's hitting the plant, or that's coming from the sun, is going to actually be incorporated into the plant tissue. The 99 other percent is going to be reflected and not absorbed and not utilized. So right here, we've got 1,000 tons of grass. That's enough to support 27 million grasshoppers. But the grasshoppers are only able to incorporate 10% of the original energy at this first level. And 27 million grasshoppers is enough grasshoppers within a year to support 90,000 frogs. And those frogs will only be able to take 10% of that energy from the grasshoppers and incorporate it into frog tissue. And so on with the trout, same thing. 90,000 frogs in a year would support 300 trout. They're only able to incorporate 10%. Again, 90% is going to be lost as heat and metabolism and reproduction and trying to find food and breathing and cellular activities. And then last, at the very top, we have humans, and 300 trout would only support one person for a year, and only 10% of the energy in those 300 trout would be able to be incorporated into the human. So, it is apparent that the number of trophic levels is going to indicate how many organisms can live at the top part of the food pyramid. So, if we shorten this food pyramid, we can support more than one human. So let's take a look at this. This is what this article I was reading was very, very interesting. So, if we were to remove the trout, say the people, all right, stop eating the fish, and people started feeding on frogs. Yeah, I mean, I know we eat frog legs, but, eat the whole thing. Eat that frog, right? Like Survivor Man. Well, if each person could get by with just 10 frogs, so 90,000 frogs in a year would be able to support 30 people. So we've gone from supporting one person to now 30. How did we do that? We removed one of the trophic levels, and we saved all that energy that would be wasted. So let's take this a little further now. Let's say that we really don't care for the frogs. Let's get rid of the trophic level of the frogs, and let's just directly start feeding on grasshoppers. So let's say that each person could get by with 100 grasshoppers per day. There's a lot of protein in there, a lot of nourishment, micronutrients. And if I was to eat 100 grasshoppers in one day, then in a year, 27 million grasshoppers could support 900 people. And I know at first you might think that's kind of disgusting, but people for centuries have been eating insects as a food source. Entomophagy is what it's technically called. So you see a grasshopper here, dragonfly, beetle, another type of beetle here. And I've eaten beetles in South America in the rainforest. Actually, it was a palm beetle larvae, like a little grub worm. Kind of looked like my thumb, like a giant maggot. And it's kind of disgusting, kind of fatty, kind of greasy, but kind of delicious at the same time. I don't know if I could do that all the time. And then one of my students sent me this video of him. He was out in the desert, and so everyone said, hey, we dare you to eat a stink bug, a dartling beetle. So he went ahead and ate it. I think his parents ended up giving him $100. Take a look at this video clip. I think that's his mom in the background laughing uncontrollably. That's his brother. Little water does help wash it down. It looks like he's getting most of his money. But see, in the United States, we look at it as kind of gross. We're starting to, some people chocolate-covered crickets, things like that. But a lot of the world, there's a really good protein source there. But even if we were like, that's disgusting, we don't want to eat crickets or grasshoppers. So let's remove the 27 million grasshoppers and now just go straight and let's just eat grass. You're like, I can't eat grass. I'm not a cow. Right, but think rice as a grass. Right? So now that if we cut those 3 trophic levels out and we're to eat 3 pounds of rice a day, it's a lot of rice, you could support 2,000 humans versus just 1. So remember, on the same piece of land or the same space that all those producers are growing, that 1,000 tons of grass that supported 1 fisherman, now if you were to move those 3 trophic levels, it's going to support 2,000 people. So again, this was the last paragraph of the article that I read, so I'll just read it to you here. It says this, the simple rule of the energy pyramids require people in India and China to eat grass and rice. Grass is rice. But in Europe and America, as most of the western parts of the world, there is a variety diet that includes large amounts of chicken, beef, lamb, pork, and fish. The rising price of meat in our supermarkets, among other things, that our expanding population and is nudging us down the food chain towards more of a more vegetarian diet. Now again, this article that I got a lot of this information from, cutting the trophic levels out, was from 1971, so it's a really old article. But again, there's a lot of truth still in there, that you remove those trophic levels, we're going to be able to support a lot more people. So again, in some of the less developed countries, people are eating more of a vegetarian diet, and a lot of times it's not by choice but necessity. That's all that can support a lot more people. So I hope you found this screencast, this presentation, interesting and helpful.